Hey now, welcome to another episode of the EXP Share podcast. My name is Matt. With me, as always, my friend Will. And today we got a good one for you folks. We're going to be talking about a bunch of news that was just released today regarding Twilight Masquerade, all the new Ogerpon cards. We're also going to be touching on some cards that were released previous to this big announcement. Lana's Assistance, a new A-Spec card, and then some new Galaxy Best Buy as free promos that you get when you purchase some stuff there. But we're not going to dive too much into that right now. First, as always, Will, how you doing today, man?
Pretty good. We're just right on the edge. I've already touched some Temporal Forces cards, pulled some good stuff, pulled an A-Spec. Obviously, the worst A-Spec there is, Master Ball, but I got it. I got an A-Spec nonetheless. You know, in 4 packs, it's not bad in four
we
packs
talked
of
about this.
boosters.
Yeah, we talked about this, man. BDIF, Lugia, you already got the piece. That's like time to play Lugia.
I think this is the sign. I guess I have to make a Lugia deck. I got the Master Ball, so I mean, with the new Minccino, you're basically kind of a single prize deck, other than the Lugia, and you can kind of just
Mm-hmm.
collapse Stadium it away and just be a fully single prize deck once you get your Archeops established. So I've seen it played on stream. I've seen a lot of people mess around with it. It's obviously winning a lot of stuff. It won the Champions League in Japan, so yeah, it could be a good deck. How about you? How are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm doing back from a road trip from SoCal up here to NorCal back home. We hit Long Beach. We hit, as the locals say, Paso Robles, which I don't know how they get away with that pronunciation, but they do. It's Paso Robles as far as I'm concerned. What else did we do? We had a really cool hiking trip over in Pinnacles Park. It's a state park about 3 hours south of where we're at from the Bay Area. And we got to go hiking in a cave, which was just such a cool experience, man. I was joking before we entered. I'm like, Mewtwo's in here. This is an unknown dungeon or something, man. So it was a really good time. Obviously a little tired from a long road trip, but I'm recovering and work's not been a great contributor towards that recovery, but we're gonna get through it. So overall, we're doing good. We're doing good. What promo did you pull at your pre-release? I'm curious.
I pulled the Maridon. So my deck was,
Nice.
you get usually 50-50, one promo stamped card, and then the other half of your deck is one of the other promos. You just don't get the stamped version. I got for Alligator as one half of my deck, and
Yeah.
Maridon is the other half. I don't think they really synergize very well together,
Interesting.
especially because Maridon plays
No, not
Electric
at
and
all.
Psychic, and then the Feraligatr plays Water. So I had three different energies in my deck. Um, for the most part, I was just using my Miraidons as attackers. I didn't have to establish, a
Mm.
stage two. I didn't have to rare candy into anything. And the Miraidons, I think, if for anyone who's gonna go to a pre-release this week, I think Miraidon is the play. It accelerates to itself. If you start a Miraidon uh, in turn one, going second, are able to attach and accelerate to yourself. By turn two, you're attacking for 160, and it's very difficult to kind of stop that once it gets going. And most other decks, really need to a couple of turns to establish an attack by either attaching two or three times. I guess the ancient deck has Sada, but I think they only give you one Sada, so you just have to hope to draw into it. I think yeah, Maridon is sort of the BDIF in the pre-release, and if you get it, you're probably gonna win.
Interesting.
I actually almost
Huh.
went undefeated,
Just that line of thought. Oh,
but in my
wow.
last round, the two of us both had undefeated record going into the last round, and we both had Maridon. And I didn't start Maridon. I started a what's called a crocodile. No, not crocodile. Whatever the baby for alligator is.
Totodile.
Totodile. I started a Totodile. They
Yeah.
started the Maridon, and were able to get the turn one attack and turn one acceleration. And then it was kind of, you know, they just had the momentum. So I was always one prize behind. I was able to get my Maridon up the next turn, but couldn't keep the pace up. So
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, it's fun. I
No,
always love pre-release,
that line of
but
thought there. So that's good, man. That line of thought actually, talking about getting Miraidon out turn one and just kind of taking it from there. I wonder if that's kind of a decent play in GLC, like a dragon deck. If you can start with Miraidon turn one and hypothetically you don't have your energies prized. That could kind of work. That's kind of got me thinking because I saw that card and I was thinking, would that work in GLC? And originally I said no, it's just not going to work. It's the energy cost is kind of strange. I guess you can kind of build around it by adding like Noivern in there that take like psychic energy typically. But I don't know. Sounds a little clunky to be honest. I might be
Yeah, I
rambling
mean,
at this point.
you still need to take a turn to accelerate
Hmm.
to yourself, and then turn two you're doing 160. But turn two doing 160, I mean, that's still very, very good. All you need to do is make sure you start your Miraidon and have an energy in hand, which, the odds of you starting your Miraidon, you you can't switch. You would have to have it, or you'd have to have a switch and switch it into the active. So you don't have great odds of getting it into the active spot and being able to attach turn one. So then at that point, it might take 2 or 3 turns to still establish it,
Yeah.
and that might not be fast enough in GLC.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds good in theory, but you have to get pretty lucky to have that one of 60 cards kind of in your hand, and everything else like needs to go into that. So, second thought, forget it, never mind. There's other cool cards that we can add to GLC later on. But that being said, we do have some cool news coming out of the Pokemon Company today regarding a bunch of good stuff. The first one we're going to be talking today is something that's a little bit older. We had not really touched on this on our previous podcast, but definitely something we want to talk about today because it kind of aligns with the bigger Twilight Masquerade being released in May, right around the time of actually the LA regionals. And that's going to be the Stellar type, and it's going to be released in that set. We have no idea what the Stellar type is, what it does, how it works, anything like that. But it's something different. And the comparison I kind of thought of was those break cards, Breakpoint, I think is what they were
Mm.
called some years ago. I'm not super familiar with the TCG history, unfortunately, but some years ago, they released a Breakpoint, was essentially going to be an addition onto an existing stage one or stage two Pokemon. So the one that comes to mind for whatever Breakpoint Marowak. I know that card was actually fairly decent, I believe, back in the day, but they don't really give us a lot of detail as to what it is. Even here in the article, for those of you that are watching at home, it says right there, we don't know how this will be represented at TCG yet. But Will, you play the games. How does this work in the video games?
I actually didn't
Terrestrialize.
play the DLC. My friend did though, and he did inform me a little bit about
Oh,
it. So it is a brand new type. It only works though when you terrestrialize. I don't think there are any Pokemon that are natively Stellar type other than this one Pokemon, Terapagos or whatever it's called, the turtle,
yeah,
this
something
rainbow
like that.
turtle. So there are no native Pokemon that are Stellar type, but you can terrestrialize into the Stellar type, and then it does 2 times damage against other terrestrialized Pokemon. So it basically has hits per weakness only on terrestrialized Pokemon. On Pokemon that aren't terrestrialized, there's no difference. So I guess, yeah, I don't foresee them printing like a brand new type like Fairy type or anything, especially because they've tried that in the past, and there's no long term commitment to printing more, and I don't think there are ever going to be other stellar types like in future generations. So it sort of is a one off. I imagine there'll be Pokemon that are stellar type terrestrialized, like there are terrestrialized versions of Garchomp or Charizard that are weird types, darkness type for Charizard instead of fire. Um, you know, Pokemon that have, with this water Garchomp instead of a ground or dragon Garchomp. Um, so there may be certain Pokemon that just have terrestrial. Yeah, no, it's curious though because it still would need a type on the card. I feel like
Yeah.
it could have a rule box that is similar to the Terra type at the top and just says like this Pokemon is Stellar Terra and does 2 times damage on all Terra Pokemon or something. But I feel like it still would need a
Mhm.
type itself. I don't know if they would be willing to print sort of one-off different type cards.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. That's what exactly is it going to be? I was kind of thinking something along the lines of so. First thing I want to say is when terrestrial Pokemon were first introduced, we had Gyarados, we had who are those original terrestrial Pokemon? Gyarados is definitely one of them.
Hmm.
The first set
They
that came
never
out, well,
ever,
Gyarados is definitely gonna be one of them.
yeah. Hmm.
they never really did anything, right? And even the fact we were expecting it to be something really, really cool, it's essentially a built-in bench barrier, which has its merits, certainly. That's completely fine. But it
but not
doesn't
particularly
really, it
exciting.
doesn't jump
Yeah.
off the page. Is it? Exactly, it is that this stellar typing, I think Terapagos CX obviously going to be like the bigger beneficiary of that new mechanic, whatever it looks like. But I have to think there's some kind of tool or some kind of something that's going to contribute towards our Garchomp EX and God forbid making even Charizard EX even better. So there has to be
Mhm.
something there that's going to make them more powerful because I mean, in my opinion, I just refuse to believe that terrestrializing is nothing more than a bench barrier. It has to be more than that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think Terapagos though is the one Pokemon that is always. Oh no, it's a normal type. So I guess you would make the card a normal type and attach a tool. That makes sense. Attach a tool that turns it into the stellar type, and the tool could just say, does two times weakness on all attacks to terrestrialize Pokemon. And I think even though the Terra ability in and of itself, like the bench barrier, is not that exciting, it did allow for Pokemon that have different types than what you expect. And I think that's always kind of exciting. This Darkness Charizard, if Charizard was fire type,
Yeah.
it probably wouldn't be the BDIF like it is now because just having a water weakness would really hurt Charizard's chances in the meta. There are just a decent number of water threats out there. It would just make the matchup against Chien-Pao even worse than it already is. And so, yeah, terrestrializing it didn't live up to its complete potential, but I do still enjoy having, just having the unexpected weird types of cards that, you would never expect, like a water Garchomp or something like that.
Definitely agreed. So we have the Terapagos EX, but in this article, it's talking about a stellar Cerule GX. These are very popular Pokemon. Sylveon's been popular since it was introduced. Cerulege right there with it. By default, just really, really good designs. You have to imagine they're going to do these Pokemon justice. If you're looking at something like a Charizard EX, which is again right up there with some of the most popular Pokemon ever designed, it has to be better than what it is now. So again, I don't know what exactly it's going to be. We can say we can go and guess all day. Basically, we can speculate what exactly it might do. But I think ultimately it's going to be some kind of addition, some existing terrestrial type. It's going to make Terapagos really good. I, I don't know. Is this like again going back to that break thing? The breakpoint cards. Is this something very similar to that? I don't know, but I'm excited for it. I'm a little afraid it's going to be like a huge letdown, and no one's going to enjoy it. No one's going to play it. It's just going to be a complete waste of time. But I mean,
Yeah,
who
I
knows,
think it's
right?
going to be a short-term gimmick. I mean, well, we'll talk about it later in this
Mm,
podcast, but even ancient and future Pokemon, I feel like we got for two sets, but looking ahead at what they're sort of already announced for the next set, it doesn't seem like we're going to see a lot of new future and ancient Pokemon cards. So, this could be a one-off set where we get the stellar type for one set and then kind of move on. I do think, though, just the opportunity of printing cards that are already Terra type, you don't necessarily have to attach like a break or a tool card or something. Stellar type is sort of always associated with like rainbow. So having like these kind of really nice rainbow looking cards that are already stellar type, I think will just be really appealing for collectors, really appealing for players. They're just going to be beautiful. I can imagine them printing just really beautiful rainbow colored cards. In the same way they printed,
mm,
really interesting backgrounds on the ancient and future cards. They had those really beautiful, shiny mirror hollows on those ancient and future cards. I could imagine like really
yeah.
beautiful mirror hollow rainbow with rainbow effects. So we'll see. I think the cards just have a lot of potential to be exciting visually, if not, actually being meta threats. But um, we'll see. And also, yeah, Sylveon and Cerulege, just really cool Pokemon. So
Really interesting to see. Like I said, I hope it's something viable. I hope it's something that doesn't have this like extreme cost of entry to play. I mean, if we're looking at like the old Mega Pokemon, when you evolved into a Mega Blastoise as an example, your turn ended, and that was it. And you kind of just had to sit there for a turn, hoping that it wouldn't get knocked out the previous or the next turn. So, I'm hoping it's something like that where the cost to play this card is just through the roof, and no one's ever going to play it. I think the concept of like terrestrializing the video game got a lot of slack in the beginning because of these crown hat things that they designed. Like I never really liked the concept to be honest, but additional typing or doubling down on the typing that you already have. Again, pretty cool concept. I don't know how they're going to incorporate into the TCG. With that being said, though, what do you want to see? What do you want it to be? If you were in control, you make the cards, you're the game designer. What would you want it to be?
If I were in control, I mean, I think just because you have to balance it with the Terra type card that we already have, I don't think it should be worse. If it's something you have to evolve into or you have to end your turn to get to become a stellar type, I don't think it makes sense in context with the other Terra Pokemon. These Terra Pokemon already have their Terra type from the second you play them onto the field. They're terastallized, and stellar type is just another, just different type of terastallized Pokemon. Your water Terra or dark Terra like Charizard or stellar type Terra, you're still just a Terra Pokemon. So I mean, in my ideal world, it would be a stellar type card that you just drop onto the field like you drop on anything else. Um, Obviously, with Sylveon and with Cerula, you still evolve up like most EXs, and like Charizard, you still have to evolve up from Eevee or from um, whatever the Cerulage's baby Pokemon is. I can't remember. Um,
Yeah, I don't know.
so you still evolve up like EXs, but it would just be that rainbow type. And I understand that, it's kind of, I think new types people are wary of new types because of fairy and lack of long-term support for it. But I don't think you really need long-term support because stellar type doesn't have any additional weaknesses. Doesn't really, all it does is just do extra damage against Terra Pokemon. So, if you just print these beautiful rainbow cards, that's just another type that doesn't have weaknesses but does do two times to Terra Pokemon. And I guess because the biggest threat right now in the format is Charizard EX, I think that would do a good job at kind of bringing Charizard EX back in check. I think especially in the next format when a lot of things that keep Charizard in check rotate, and Charizard just gets better with Buddy Poffin. We're going to need something to keep it in check, and and 330 HP is just so big. If we're going to be able to finally hit for weakness, and grass Pokemon are just not ubiquitous enough to really keep Charizard in check. At least we'll have the Rainbow, Stellar type to keep Charizard in check.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna take a more ridiculous route. I'm gonna say when you start attaching energy to this thing, it's gonna take on the energy type in it. It
Ooh,
could be, I don't know, a stellar typing with a bunch of fire energy, and all of a sudden this thing's a fire typing. And you can play different energy to kind of depend, whatever you're trying to counter against. Say you're playing Charizard, throw some grass energy on that bad boy, and there you go. That's your grass Pokemon. So unlike locates things, now you have this thing could be any kind of typing, depending on the energy you're putting in. Is it the first energy? Is it the last energy? Do you get a pick? Again, gets extremely complicated, probably bad game design, but that's just me dreaming.
yeah,
So
that seems
for
too
you,
OP
those of
because
you
you'd
listening
be
at home, watch.
you'd be good
Yeah,
against any deck. You just have a weakness against any deck you want to play against. That's
I mean,
pretty
maybe it's just a
OP.
tool, and then you have to just play a bunch of Lost Vacuum or something. I don't know, but regardless, I think we're all excited for those of you listening at home and watching wherever you may be in the world. In the comment section, drop it down. What do you think? Really excited to hear from you folks. That being said, we have something a little bit on the lighter side to talk about next. That's going to be some giveaways. So, as you already know, those of you listening at home and watching wherever you may be, GameStop, Best Buy here in America tend to be your locations that you want to go ahead and pick up that first initial purchase, aside from the Pokemon Center. And the main reason this is because you get free stuff. I live right next to Will and I live right next to a GameStop, and we're always heading there to grab our promos. Last set in Paradox Rift, we were able to see the Iron Moth and Slitherwing promos. Very cool. I think what's really great about this set and the potential promos we're going to be getting, one, Galaxy Holofoil, which has never been a thing. As far as I'm concerned, the promos actually aren't even holographic. It's just a regular print card with a special stamp, and that's really about it. But potentially this time around, we're getting Galaxy Holofoils of two extremely playable cards in Miraidon and Koraidon. Will, I know you're going to be jumping all over this one. I know I am. I'm probably going to want to grab four of those Koraidon, four of those Miraidon. Do you think it's real? Do you think we're getting Galaxy
Well,
Holofoils for our
UK got
promos?
it for sure, and I just feel like the international cards outside of Japan. are all controlled by the same company. They're all controlled by Pokemon Company International. I don't see why they'd be printing the promos differently in Europe versus here. So I'm really, really hopeful.
Mm.
Obviously, I think the stamps are slightly different. Both cards in Europe get the Temporal Forces stamp. There obviously is no GameStop stamp over there. I actually like the Temporal Forces stamp way better. I think the GameStop stamp kind of looks ugly. It's always that red,
Oh yeah,
font. But
yeah.
regardless, no, I think we're going to get those Galaxy foils. Very, very excited. It also looks like I think the Koraidon is the GameStop and the Miraidon will be Best Buy. So, the one that I really am looking forward to for, Dino Box or Ancient Box or whatever you're going to call it is getting that GameStop stamp. So slightly unfortunate not getting the quite as cool Temporal Forces stamp, but GameStop I think stamps are easier to get. Best Buy is always kind of a pain, and GameStop does a good job of providing those promos.
Yeah, I agree. I'm hoping that they change that because just like you, I think those GameStop promo stamps are just hideous. It ruins the card. It looks like when professional sports teams started putting advertisement on their jerseys, and you have this traditional classic Yankee jersey, the classic pinstripes, and then you just slap some logo on the sleeve, you slap some logo on the left chest or something, and all of a sudden you just completely ruined what
Yeah,
was perfectly
you just
fine
cheapen
before.
it.
So we'll see. Yeah, exactly. So I'm hoping that they have these temporal forces stamps instead of the GameStop ones. If it is GameStop, again, Crichton got done dirty because I really don't like the pre-release promo. I think it looks terrible if you ask me, but we'll see. Regardless, there'll be some Crichtons out there that we can grab. So Best Buy, those of you nearby GameStop. The 22nd, let me double check that there just to be safe before I guess. Friday the 22nd, which is, what is that? 8 days from today. Go by your local GameStop or your Best Buy, grab those promo cards. Typically, with a $15 purchase, you'll get it. If you made friends with the guy who works there, maybe you get a second one for free. Who knows? So get excited. Temporal Forces about a week away. That
My
being
friend
said, we're
works
going
at
to jump
GameStop. I'm
way
gonna
into the future now.
Sorry, my friend works at
Oh,
GameStop. I'm gonna
there
have
you
him
go. Even
set
better.
aside a lot of promos for me. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Nice.
Please, the next.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I think there might be a bit of a delay, so apologies for those of you listening. If we're talking over one another, that might be the reason why. That being said, we're going to jump ahead to the future a few months from now, sometime in May, when we're going to be getting what we know right now is Crimson Haze. We don't really know the full name. I believe it is going to end up being Twilight Masquerade. I think both those sets combined in Japan become our Twilight Masquerade here.
Mhm.
But we're going to be talking about a new ace spec, and that's going to be Survival Cast, a essentially a successor to Focus Sash way back in the day. For those going to be again another tool card, another ace spec card. It reads: if the Pokemon this card is attached to has full HP and would be knocked out by damage, which is important. So in the case like Roaring Moon does not work here; it has to be damage from an attack from your opponent's Pokemon. That Pokemon is not knocked out, and its remaining HP becomes 10. Then discard this card. You can only play one ace spec, etc., etc. When I first saw this card, I was like, it's not that great. And I still don't think it's that great. It might be good in the future, but Will, what are your thoughts on this?
I actually think this is the worst ace spec because it's single use.
Wow.
It's single use. It
Yeah.
gets discarded immediately. It's really hard to get tools back from the discard pile. I don't think there's almost any way to get a tool back from the discard pile right now. I can't think of any. And and it can be vacuumed. So you can attach it, have it vacuumed during the opponent's turn, and then it never even gets to be used. It gets discarded before it ever even gets its effect to be used. Um, yeah, even the other tool, A-Spec, which is the cape, the equivalent of the Cape of Toughness, but it doesn't
Hmm.
give an extra prize. Um, Even that, I feel like, doesn't discard itself. It's still, if you survive that turn, it stays attached. So I don't know. I'm not necessarily sold on this. I don't really see too many situations where this is going to be a beneficial card.
Yeah, I would agree. There has to be winners, there has to be losers, there has to be a first and a last. And I think it's pretty clear this is the last. Currently, as we know the meta to be, this is going to be the worst. About some other aspects later on today, we don't know the exact details of those cards yet, but we do know we're getting more. This has got to be the bottom of the pile for me. I don't. I mean, I plan on buying one of each base spec just because you never know, but this might be the one where I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'll be picking this one up. But then again, it's probably going to be like $3.
Yeah, I mean, especially because no one will be playing it. I'm sure it will not be very expensive. Um, oh, just as another aside, just because I pulled the Master Ball and saw an ace spec in my hands this weekend, they do look really good.
Oh
I
yeah, yeah.
mean, regardless of what the quality of this card is, just collecting ace specs in general, they are really. I know some people are turned off by the pink color. I think it really kind of looks good. I like the embossing. I like the texture on the card. They're all beautiful cards, but this is the worst of all of them.
Yeah, effects wise, I don't think it's really close. But I haven't seen it, so I have an old eight Master Ball I spec that next time I see, I would like to compare them, see which one looks better. I think over the years, obviously, Pokemon has become very innovative in how they design their cards and how they print them with etching and holographic effects. I'm going to see them. I'll be going to pre-release this Saturday. If I can get one, I'll be over the moon. I'm planning on buying them all anyway, but if I can just pull one of them, who knows, maybe it'll save me $20. So not too much to report on here, but nonetheless, it is a new A spec. Speaking of new cards, we can jump on to the next tab here, and that's going to be a new trainer card called Lana's Assistance, which unfortunately, I would say this is a nerfed version of our Clara card that we got back in. Oh, geez, what was Clara released? You folks know what
But
Clara
Clara
is. Let me just
rotates.
read this card for you real quick.
Clara rotates with
Clara
the
rotates.
rotation. So this is basically Clara, but with an extra caveat that it cannot be a rule box. Clara was really
Yeah.
just used in the Lost Box Charizard deck,
Mm-hmm.
and this just can't get your Radiant Charizard back. So I don't know what the utility is. I'm sure there will be some decks at some point in the future that do use this card, but for right now, it's just a worse Clara. It gets one less card. It doesn't get rule boxes, and yeah, I think it's just I don't know. It's a good looking card. I mean, I like all the full art trainers, but um, yeah, I don't
I
know what
mean,
decks will play
maybe
this.
maybe GLC. For those of you folks who are just listening here, put up to three any combination of Pokemon that doesn't have a rule box, as Will was saying, and basic energy from your discard pile into your hand. So your Radiant Zards, your EXs, your Vs, things like that, can't touch them. This doesn't really work with Lugia, right? Because they don't play special energy. So it's two Pokemon, a basic energy, two basic energy, and a Pokemon. Maybe it's just all energy. Regardless, I think we kind of are in agreement here. This isn't a very good card. It might be okay. Why not just play Clara? So I don't know.
I mean, it's basically a rod, though. Obviously, it goes to your hand instead of
Ordinary
into the
Rod.
deck, but
Yeah.
having to play your supporter for turn for basically a rod, and I don't know if there are going to be that many situations where this is worth it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Again, maybe end of the game, you have an attacker that you can accelerate energy to fairly quickly. It might work there, but as we kind of mentioned with the previous aspect card we were just talking about, and that's okay. That's completely fine. Next card we're going to jump onto is something that's a little different, and again, kind of a nerfed version of a previous card that was printed some years ago. This new card is called Boomerang Energy, and as you can kind of guess by the name, there's a concept of coming back to you. So, right here, real quick, Boomerang Energy is special energy. As long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides colorless energy. If this card is discarded by the effect of an attack used by the Pokemon this card is attached to, attach this card from your discard pile to that Pokemon after attacking. So, use the attack, you have to discard it, it comes back to you. Kind of a cool concept, but some years ago we got something called Recycle Energy, which was in just about every way better. That card read, if this card is discarded from play, put it into your hand instead of the discard pile. Sure, it doesn't accelerate to the Pokemon, but again, well, I'm not seeing it, man. I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, I was looking through. I literally like went to even expanded and just looked at Pokemon that discard energy from themselves. There aren't that many, but unfortunately, there is one, and it is one of the strongest cards in the meta in standard right now. Greninja. It discards two energies when it attacks. So typically,
Hmm.
it requires two water and one colorless energy to attack. You could just choose to discard one of those waters and this boomerang energy. Um, and then the boomerang energy comes back, and your Greninja still has one colorless, one water. Next turn, it would be basically ready to go with a single attachment if it survives the turn. So Greninja is one of the most threatening, most powerful attackers in the game. I think it could be interesting. Obviously, it would just depend on your opponent whiffing the attack. So I don't know if it's that good, but just the threat of Greninja attacking 2 turns in a row is very scary. I don't really know if there's anything else that
Um,
makes this card really that interesting.
Agreed. And we've only seen a handful of cards from Twilight Masquerade up until this point, so there might very well be a card that this synergizes really well with. But for now, based on what we know, based on the current meta, and based on historical context, I don't think Boomerang Energy is going to be the play, but that's okay. We're going to talk about something really cool that I have yet to see, even on my travels for work and whatnot, and that's going to be vending machines. I know it sounds a little funny, but TPCI has been essentially rolling out these different vending machines across the country. And right now they're up to 200 locations, and we finally got some in California. They're going to be down south. Will and I are up north, so it's not going to really apply to us. But these are essentially places where you can go and you can buy Pokemon cards from a vending machine. And from what I've been told, it's a really cool experience. Well, have you seen one of these before in person?
Not in the US, but in Japan, they are kind of everywhere. I saw one in the airport. I saw them just all around Tokyo. They're pretty cool. They look actually more sophisticated, and they're big. They're bigger than the ones I'm seeing here
Mm,
listed on Poke Beach. These are the ones that look like they're available in America, but um, it seems like a pretty cool kind of convenient way. Targets and stuff are always a mess. They're always cleared out. I feel like they're never organized, and they never really stocked of Pokemon cards. I feel like this will sort of prevent the mess that you see in regular retail stores that aren't, card stores. I think they're directly sold from Pokemon Company, so there should always be MSRP. Um, it's interesting. It's cool. I think it's just in the West Coast now. Um, I don't know if there are there going to be any kind of near us. They have a list of them here. I mean,
Yeah, if
who
you scroll
knows?
down some, the California list is at the very bottom. But
Uh,
again, everything's in SoCal. There's nothing ever remotely close to us. I mean, we're
mm.
looking at Burbank, we're looking at Fullerton, Glendale, LA, of course, being like a hot spot for that. And it seems like they're targeting not so much health stores. It's a Vons, it's an Albertsons, Food for Less. For those of you folks who aren't familiar with these stores, these are grocery stores. These are not Target or Walmart or anything along those lines. So I'm not sure why they would put him there over something like a Target. Maybe there's some kind of agreement in place saying, hey, you can't do anything besides sell these cards in this way for X amount of time. But as Will was mentioning, if you go to Target or Walmart here in the Bay Area, those stores are typically empty or they have empty product. Like literally, people have just opened up the package or the box, whatever, and ripped that stuff out and walked out. So um, I think this is really, it makes it a little more accessible for some folks, and it's more of like a um, spontaneous purchase like you would with like a pack of gum or piece of candy or
And
something
I
in the
think
aisle on your way to.
unfortunately, Pokemon cards do probably just attract a certain level of shoplifting because they're small and they
Yeah.
actually are worth money if
Hmm.
you pull, a good card. And so in a machine, it just makes it a little bit more protected. Um, but also just cool. Like I don't know, getting a Pokemon card out of a vending machine seems like some sort of sci-fi future that's neat. So
It's an experience, right? It's a novel idea. We barely get introduced to this concept, so I'm hoping they get brought up north to the Bay Area fairly soon, and we can go ahead and check that out. But in the meantime, if you folks want to check that out, pokebeach.com, which as you can tell, we get a bunch of our resources and information from this website. Definitely check it out. Cannot encourage you enough to do that. It's just a really good place to keep up with the game. Of course, you can tune into the XP Share podcast as well, so something to think about there. All right. Well, here's the big one, folks. Twilight Masquerade has officially been announced to be released in May this year, and we got a bunch of cool stuff to show you today. So we're going to go little by little here and show you what we got. First thing I want to know is
mhm.
going to be obviously the date, May 24th. That's when we're going to be doing that. Pre-releases will probably take place between the 11th and the 19th. But the pack art is actually kind of telling. So we have an Ogerpon, which we'll dive more into those guys later. We have a Blood Moon Usuluna, who we talked about some weeks ago, a fantastic card. Really, really going to be a very special card for a lot of decks. And then I honestly I don't know how to pronounce the name of this Pokemon. Is this Sinus
Sinistra?
thing?
Sinistra? It's like
Sinistra?
matcha and Sinistea. Sinistea was the first, previous evolution, so it's
Yeah.
Sinistra. Sinistra, I guess, like matcha, Sinistra.
Honestly, who knows? They kind of give a little background to this Pokemon. I thought it was a little weird, but you know what? It's fine. Some people like it. One card I'm actually really excited about, and you're going to see on this pack art right here, is a Terrestrial type Dragon Dragapult. So you're doubling down on that Dragon typing, just like you did with the Gyarados, who's Terrestrial Water. I love Dragon Pokemon. I love Dragon is sick. I hope it's good because I'm down to play. It doesn't matter if it's even halfway decent. I will be playing that card, but who knows? That being said, we can jump down a little bit more. You see the art box there. It's got the Ogerpon on there. It looks really good. Nothing really super exciting here. But if we scroll down a little bit more, we get our first look at the Ogerpon cards. Will, I think it'd be a good idea for us to read and rank these in order in terms of what we think they are. Have you had a chance to actually review any of these
Yes,
cards yet?
I've reviewed all the cards today.
Okay, so
Frankly, I think there are probably just two that are actually, I don't know. I mean, it depends on the format.
well,
It depends on how things go. I have two
yeah.
that I think are going to be good, and we'll see what you
Well,
think is good.
yeah, no, so let's do this. So I think we should kind of go side by side and rank this together. I think this will be
Okay,
fun for those of you listening. You can play along as well. Who's the worst one? Who's number four? Who's at the bottom of your list? I have a clear winner ready for that, but I'm interested to know your thoughts.
interesting. I actually, who's the worst? For right now, I think uh the water Ogerpon is actually the worst.
Interesting. So that's okay. So I'm going to say the fire one. We could talk about both these cards right now. If you want to click on the water one, we can go and read that off to our audience and
Okay.
kind of dive into that one a little bit more. Um, I got to tell you, I don't. Okay, here we go. Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX. This is a terrestrial type Pokemon, so it is going to have the built-in bench barrier. We got two attacks here, 210 health, a water type Pokemon. First attack for a colorless energy. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon cannot retreat. Then we have a slightly more interesting attack here, Torrential Pump for one water and two colorless energy. It does 100 damage, but the text adds a little bit more to that. You may shuffle three energy attached to this Pokemon into your deck. If you do, this attack also does 120 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Don't imply weakness and resistance, yada yada. Um, I'm interested. Well, why'd you put this at the bottom? Because I actually have this a little bit higher.
I think, I mean, Manaphy is just a thing. Everyone's playing Manaphy. Greninja does a very similar
Mm-hmm.
effect and is a one prizer. I just don't think it fills a role right now that isn't really necessary. Obviously, it does a little bit more damage, 100 and 120 instead of 90 and 90. I don't know if those numbers are particularly relevant. 90 and 90 is just so powerful to take out, those early stage ones. So, and it requires you to shuffle all three energies instead of the two on the Greninja. And it's a two prizer that's 210 HP, which is just, I mean, all of these Ogerpons you'll see are 210, which is just very, very frail. I don't necessarily know. It's good, but it just doesn't really fill a role that's different than Greninja, which is one of the most powerful and most played cards in the format.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I think everything you said is 100% accurate. The only reason I think this is a little bit higher on my list, and I'm not going to reveal all my answers quite yet here, is the item card that kind of goes along with these guys. But again, we're going to save that for a little bit later on today. I want to jump onto the fire one here because for me, he's at the bottom of my list. And I forget his name. It's like Hearthstone or something. Earth
Hearth
Flame
Flame
Mask Ogre
Mask.
Pontiacs. Okay, so 210 health, just like Will mentioned earlier. The attack here, we have two attacks: Fire, Colorless, Wrathful Hearth, 20 times damage. This attack does 20 damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. Not super exciting. The second attack, I think, is what really drops this card to the bottom of the list for me. Three Fire Energy, which is a fairly expensive attack. Dynamic Blaze, 140 plus. If your opponent's active Pokemon is an evolution Pokemon, this attack does 140 more damage and discard all the energy from this Pokemon. So for me, you're doing 280 now, and then you can't even come back and attack next turn. I don't see the point of this card at all, but you know what? They had to print it. It's one of the four masks, so they had to do it. So for me, this is the bottom of my list.
I mean, 280 hits the V star numbers. It's a perfectly relevant number um, with the new A spec that does 50 damage more to EXs. It can kill a Charizard. You can also potentially power it up in one turn because you have Magma Basin. So you can Magma Basin, you can attach for turn, and then potentially there's other, there's the Armor Rouge that allows you to move
Hmm.
fire energy from a different Pokemon. Um, 280 is just pretty good numbers right now. Uh, I don't think it's terrible. And fire has a lot of support. You could put it in a Charizard and you could accelerate with Charizard's ability as well. There are ways to get that many fire energies accelerated quickly as compared to these other types. There aren't as good energy acceleration on them. I don't think it's the worst. I mean, all of these cards I think are actually relatively mediocre. I don't know if any of the Ogerpons are going to be a really, really powerful meta deck, but I don't think it's the worst one.
I'm kind of happy we're not agreeing here because we've agreed on every single card up until this point, and now we're kind of differentiating from one another. So it's good. We're kind of playing devil's advocate. So by all means, continue to do that. So just to recap real quick, Will has at the bottom of his list the water type. I have at the bottom of my list fire type. Will, who's your third one? Who's the third worst?
Third worst. This is tough. This is tough now. I guess so. So my first worst was Ogerpon. I guess the fire. I guess yeah. I think the fire would be the third worst. So I guess we're not that far off, but the third worst would be the fire.
Yeah,
What about you? What would the third worst be to you?
it's tough. It is tough because I'm kind of debating between the grass and the water one. The grass one's got a really good ability, and I think maybe this is a good time to talk about it now. So if you want to pull that card up for those of you folks who are watching, for those of you listening, I'm gonna read the card off to you right now. This is the Teal Mask Ogerpon EX. This is a grass terrace health. The ability Teal Dance reads once during your turn, you may attach a basic grass energy from your hand to this Pokemon. If you attach energy to this Pokemon in this way, draw a card. So acceleration energy, you're drawing a card there. Not a bad ability at all. And then for 3 grass energy, Myriad Leaf Shower, 30 plus damage. This attack does 30 more damage for each energy attached to both active Pokemon, which, not the worst. This probably does pretty well against Charizard EX. It does really well against War and Moon. 3 grass energy is, I mean,
With three, though, with
I don't
only
know.
three, it does exactly 180, and that is enough to kill one hit KO a Charizard. Because it'll have two energies
Yes, it
attached. You'll
is.
have three energy attached. That'll be 180. But I feel like there are so many cards they've been printing that do like exactly 180 just to hit those Charizard or grass Pokemon that do exactly 180 to hit the Charizard numbers. It's good in a very specific
Yeah.
matchup, but 180 against other Pokemon isn't enough. Like to keep up in a meta, you have to not only kill Charizard, you have to kill other meta threats. And I think, at that point, you're going to have to potentially be accelerating 4 grass or 5 grass to be hitting the 210 to 30 numbers. So, yeah, I just don't think it's quite good. I think this and the fire one are probably around the same second and third for me. Um, it acceleration is great. Having acceleration on it, being able to draw a card is great. I just don't know if that attack is necessarily quite good enough, hitting quite high enough numbers to really um, be great. So yeah, I would agree with you. I don't know if this is third or second, but it's the ability is what really is making me second guess it. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. You know what? I got to give you an answer here. So it's going to be fire at the bottom of my list, and then it's going to be the grass type. I think it's a cool ability. It's just, what do we have that supports grass? We have Gardenia's Vigor. We have a couple baby Pokemon that are able to help with energy and able to help health and healing and things like that. But grass just kind of gets the short end of the stick all the time. It really hasn't. We had a good grass deck.
Yeah, I mean, I
Ever?
think if you have a bunch of Ogerpons out, they can all accelerate, but only to themselves, and then you can maybe use energy transfers or energy switch to switch
Yeah.
from one Ogerpon to the next, and then potentially, if you have all four out and a bunch of energy in hand, you can accelerate four, switch them around, get a bunch of energy on one Ogerpon in one turn, and maybe have four or five energies attached. Um, at that point you might be hitting at least hitting those 220 numbers. But these guys are frail. You spend all those energy switches, you get this guy all built up, and then it's immediately going down the next turn because it's only 210 HP. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any of
Yeah.
these are good, but I think I might still give this second, like I said. So water last, then fire, then this grass, just because that ability and being able to draw more cards is good, and it does kill Charizard, which is the biggest threat right now. But um, other than that, yeah, I don't know. Second for me.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
then
That's fair. That's more than fair. So let's go ahead and recap here. Water, fire, grass. Correct.
yes.
Okay. So that
So
means you have
are
the fighting type at the top of your list.
are we? Oh yeah. So fighting is my top list. What is your number one then? And what is your number two?
I'm actually going to agree with you there. So I'm going to have fire, grass, water, and fighting. And there's a reason why I picked those two at the top, but I think we got to talk about the fighting terrestrial type before we jump into uh, kind of that whole topic there. So if you want to bring that up for the folks who are watching and for those of you listening, we're going to read that card off to you right now. This is the Cornerstone Master in 10 health, just like the other three fighting type ability, which is a really good ability. It's fantastic in my opinion. Cornerstone Stance. Prevent all damage from attacks done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon that have an ability. So, Path is gone when this card comes out. No way to do that. Charizard has an ability. Um, Gardevoir has an ability. What Pidgeot has all of the good cards have ability. That's kind of the point, right? Abilities and a good attack really make a great Pokemon. On the attack here, honestly, not that great. Fighting color 40 damage. This attack's damage isn't affected by weakness or resistance or by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. Essentially, a shred effect. 140 seems to be the sweet spot for those cards. Um, the ability, I think, really makes the card. The attack is kind of a secondary thought. This is going to be good in some capacity, right? Well,
Yeah, I mean, Alolan Vulpix, which is still relatively popular. I think it's winning events in Japan right now, post rotation.
yeah.
Has just always been relatively powerful. I think it's previously won regionals here in America in previous formats. Um, just being able to prevent Pokemon with abilities, which tend to be the most popular and most powerful Pokemon. They tend to have really good abilities. So preventing damage from attacks from Pokemon with abilities is just always been really powerful. Alolan Vulpix, like I said, I think has been and will continue to be a major threat. This is similar. 140, isn't quite as good numbers. I think Alolan Vulpix, I'm just looking up right now, does 160. Alolan Vulpix's attack does 160. This one does 140. You're still two hit KOing to V stars with 280. If you get tools and stuff like that, you can buff that damage up and potentially get those two hit KOs on Charizard or other Pokemon with higher HP. So it's not the worst numbers. You will be always getting those two hit KOs, and if they can't attack you back, they didn't tech for you. If they are only playing attackers that have abilities, they're just it's basically game over. You just scoop because you're done. So yeah, I mean this ability just is inherently powerful. Although this is different than Alolan Vulpix. Alolan Vulpix is on its attack. Its attack says, on your opponent's next
Mm-hmm.
turn, prevent damage from Pokemon with abilities. This is an ability, so there are ways around it, even without the path to the peak. Your opponent could play. What is the thing that Chen Pao's players play to turn the ability off of Manaphy? Um,
Oh, canceling clone.
yeah, you could play a canceling clone technically, and then go right through this ability. You could tech around it. It depends if this card becomes a threat. I don't know, but there are more ways around this than there are around Alolan Vulpix V-Star.
Agreed. That's actually a really good point. The Vulpix ability, or it's not an ability, it's an attack, as you mentioned. This is an ability, so those tend to be a little more susceptible to effects and things like that. But the reason that I have this on top of my list in the water at number two is because of the item card that goes along with this, Ogre's Mask. So if you can pull that one up real quick, I want to go ahead and read that one very quickly here. This is admittedly a bit of a gimmick. I'm not going to be DIF or anything like that, but Ogre's Mask reads, this is an item card, by the way, folks. This is not a supporter. This is an item card. You can play as many of these as you want without consequence. Choose a Pokemon EX in your discard pile that has Ogerpon in its name. Switch it with one of your Pokemon EX in play that has Ogerpon in its name. Any attached cards, damage counters, special conditions, turns in play, all of those things remain on the new Pokemon. So this is kind of my crazy concept behind it. And Will, bear with me here. I know it's a bit of a pipe dream, but just hear me out for a second. You got your water, you got your fight. Going down, depending on the need in that particular moment of the game, you can use this mask and swap them out. The energy cost on the water and the fighting is only one of a color, and then everything else is colorless. So you can kind of
Mm.
freely attach energy, swap them out when you need to, and the canceling clone that we talked about earlier, maybe there's a boss's orders or a counter catcher. You bring up that mana fee, you're kind of messing around that way. 120 actually is pretty relevant damage because that also takes out a Bibarel on the bench potentially. So again, I don't know if this is a pipe dream or not. It sounds like a lot to like. There's a lot of moving parts, but I think there's some kind of potential there. The other cards I'm not super excited about, but I think the fighting in the water, throw in this trainer item, you might have something there.
Interesting. I guess those do somewhat synergize. I mean, I don't know. And, even if you wanted to play just like a one of fighting type Ogerpon in a water type deck, you could play the rainbow, whatever the current rainbow energy is, like a one of or a couple of those rainbow energies. And
Luminous
then,
energy.
yeah, you could play a couple luminous energies. And then, even if you're playing Excalibur accelerated a bunch of water around, but also attached Luminous Return. You could use your fighting guy. You could use the water Ogerpon. Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I still think both of these cards don't really fill a niche that other cards don't already fill. So Ogerpon, I think Alolan Vulpix V-Star is just a better version of this Ogerpon. I think uh, the water Ogerpon is basically the same as a Greninja. I guess the 120 is somewhat a little bit relevant for Vibra, like you said. Um, so maybe people will play this, but I think just the fact that it's a two prizer and relatively frail, I don't know if that extra 30 damage is really going to be pushing people to play this over a Greninja. So yeah, I don't think any of these are meta defining cards, but they are interesting.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think they're going to be face melters by any stretch of the imagination. We have the baby tail mask Ogerpon here as well. It's not very exciting. In fact, I don't even think it's worth reading about, to be honest. But the other big piece of information that came out today was we're getting actually six more A spec cards. We saw two already. We saw the reset stamp, and we also, I believe it's called, unfair stamp or something along
Hmm.
those lines. And then we also saw the survival cast earlier that just might be the worst ice spec ever made. I don't know, but regardless, we have four more that we haven't seen yet, and we already have things like Maximum Bell. We have the Prime Catcher. We have some really good ace specs already. So if you're telling me we're going to get four more potentially really great ace specs, really adds a lot of things into the pool that I think by the time we get to this point in the meta, we're going to have a really healthy game in our hands with a bunch of different archetypes that allow players to really almost express themselves in their gameplay. If you want to do future, great. You want to do Zard, great. You want to throw some Gardevoir out there, awesome. You want to be Goldie, go for it. There's going to be so many different archetypes. I don't know if the game's ever been healthier at this point. So I'm really excited for the future.
Yeah, I mean, and here's a list of all the EXs that are going to be in the next set. Blood Moon or Selena, which we've already seen. I don't think we've seen Screamtail or Ironthorn or Sinistra. And then three more unrevealed EX cards. And then seven Terra Pokemon, which we've seen Magcargo. I don't think we've seen Greninja, Dragapult, and we have seen the four Ogerpon. So could be interesting. Greninja, I feel like, is just a very popular Pokemon. I feel like popular Pokemon tend to get relatively cool or powerful cards. Greninja could be cool. Dragapult, is one of your favorites. I think it's a fan favorite as well. That could be really cool. So I think this set is interesting. The one thing that I'm a bit upset about is are there really going to be any new ancient cards printed? We've had only two sets with ancient and future cards. I guess we're getting Screamtail and Iron Thorns EX, so I guess those might have like a future tag on them. But will we get supporters? Will we get item cards or anything like that? That will definitely help our Dino Box if they print just a few more of those cards to get in the discard pile. Dino Box will just
Yeah,
power up. I hope there's
yeah.
just a few more cards printed, but we'll see. But for now, I mean, we still have Temporal Forces to look forward to, so this is a bit further out, a little bit of time, but it's always exciting to look into the future a little bit.
Yeah, and I think they do a good job of kind of keeping us on the string, right? Like we haven't given you this set, like it's coming out in a week. We know that already. But here's a bunch of other cards that are going to be released in May that you have to look forward to. So we're already taking your money. We're already accepting pre-orders on the Pokemon Center website. So it's a money-making machine. It works every single time for people like you and me who just cannot stop getting interested. We just can't say. And we had talked about this before we started recording. I haven't looked at my cards in a while. If I'm playing, great, but otherwise, I'm not really looking at my stuff. I'm kind of bored of the meta. It's been the same thing for 6 months. Obviously, Temporal Force is going to be a huge mix-up to that. Twilight Masquerade looks like it's going to be a okay set. We there's still a lot of things that we haven't seen quite yet, but when you include A specs, you include things like potentially some new EXs, potentially some and Blood Moon or Saluna is already a big game changer in of itself. You have to think Twilight Masquerade is going to be pretty impactful as well.
Yeah, I feel like we're kind of on like a TikTok kind of cycle where there's usually one really big set that affects the meta, and then like kind of a
Mm-hmm.
in between set that has maybe one or two meta defining cards, and the rest is kind of filler. I feel like Temporal Forces is like we're really dropping a whole ton of stuff on you that's going to really define the meta, really going to change things. Ace specs are huge, really filling out the ancient and future cards, really making those things um, new archetypes. And this, I think, is going to be kind of in between. It almost feels like a final, even though it's not going to be obviously the final Scarlet and Violet set. This kind of catches us up with almost everything from all the DLCs. We're going to get Ogerpons. I guess the next set after that will be the Stellar type. But our sets are combining the two Japanese sets. So are we going to get the Stellar type
Mm-hmm.
in here? Will that be in this set? I believe it will, right? Or is that
It should, right? I feel like
yeah,
Twilight kind of goes with that stellar concept, and then
yeah.
the Ogerpon be the masquerade side of things. So, sense because traditionally speaking, that is what happens. Japan gets two sets, we get one. The beauty of getting two sets is that you're kind of getting new stuff kind of consistently, whereas with one big combination, we're waiting 3 months for new stuff. Whereas Japan has to wait probably like 6 weeks to get new cards. So we're never going to be on the same track because then we're pretty close. This set comes out in May. I'm sorry, this set comes out in what is that, April, and then we get it in May, something along those
This
lines. We get it a
this
month
set
after
for
Japan,
us,
is what I'm really
we
trying to
get it
say here.
in
So,
May. We get it in May, I believe.
oh, then what does Japan get it? Did that say June down there? Is that what that said?
Oh wait, does
'Cause that would be a first. I don't think we've ever
no,
gotten
no, no.
a main set before Japan.
No,
What
I
did that say
think
down there?
I'm not
Did I read it
sure.
wrong?
Uh,
I think I might have
sorry. But
misread. I
yeah,
don't
I
know.
think you just misread. I think this is our set, right? They're showing us the English packs. So I believe that's when we get it. I just
Yeah,
don't know if
yeah.
it's giving us the information for when Japan gets it. They may get it in April or they get it before us.
Well, regardless, LA Regionals is on right around that same time as the set this releases. So, for those of you going to LA Regionals, grab a booster box, go have some fun, go do the tournament, make day two. It's really setting up LA to be a fantastic regional. I think it's going to be a ton of fun. I know Will and I have a lot of big plans to be going down there with our group here, so we're pretty excited about that. So in the comments, folks, let us know what you think of the Ogerpons. If you have a rank list, put that in there as well. We'd love to know what you think. Otherwise, let's go ahead and wrap things up today. We have game Blaine's quiz. So for those of you who are a little behind on things, completely fine. There's Blaine's quiz right there. Will was able to find a copy at some card shop. Was that local? Where did you even go to get that?
Where did I get this? It was, I mean, it's not relatively local. It's near where I work, which is North Bay, like Rohnert Park, Santa
Okay.
Rosa area.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Well, that being said, so right now, Will's in the lead by 40 points. Somehow he's gotten two back-to-back first time guesses. He gets it the right away. So if I use one hint here and just don't get it, it's going to be hard to come back here. So this is a big moment for me. I got to get this right. Will, whenever you're ready, I'm good to go, man.
I actually didn't try to be too tricky this time. I think this card,
Okay.
or this, not card, this Pokemon, it could be something that you're familiar with. So let's just get right into it. I'm going to read the Pokedex entry and we'll see if you know it. Hopefully, you'll need a hint, but we'll see. Okay. There is one harder and one easier one, so I'm going to give you the easier one. Yeah, I'm not going to be that mean. These Pokemon prefer a tidy habitat. They are always sweeping and dusting, using their tails as brooms.
What? Using their tails as brooms, cleaning and dusting. Okay. Cleaning and dusting? I don't know why my mind went to Smeargle first, but that's a paintbrush. That's not going to work here. Then my mind went to Mousehold, but I don't think those things have tails. Read it
Yeah, I
to me.
don't. These Pokemon prefer a tidy habitat. They are always sweeping and dusting, using their tails as brooms. Are you cheating right now? What are you looking at? You're investigating.
No, no, I'm looking at my tips here. What am I allowed to do? So tip one is what stage is it? Tip two is what generation? Tip three is a species. I really don't want to use those things, but if I don't, I risk being
Well, you should
behind
still make a
40
guess. Like
points
a guess
and
is
not
free.
being
There's
able to
no
come back.
harm in guessing. So you can make an official guess right now, and we can move on to a hint if you need it.
Okay, here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna risk it for the biscuit here. We're gonna just go for it. So I'm gonna lock in my answer here, but I have to. There's one little caveat to this. I just don't know if it's the basic or the stage one. That's my only problem here. So I'm gonna hope. I'm going for the basic Pokemon. I'm gonna say that now, and if I get the name wrong, I do apologize. And the only reason I'm guessing this Pokemon is because of a card that gets released in Temporal Forces. So Minchino, Chinchino, one of those things.
Which one is your official guess?
I don't know. I can't remember which one is the basic one. Is it Minchino or Chinchino? Which one? Because there's some art in this set that one's like a dirty room, one's a clean room. Minchino evolves into Chinchino. Okay, Minchino. Final answer.
Minchino, you got it.
Hey! You know what? This really is the nerdiest game in America, and somehow we get it right every time. I have no idea. And that's what set is that from? Or so what deck entry was that?
That is the black and white, the original, game it was released
Ah.
in. That is the black and white Pokedex entry.
So the only reason I haven't thought of that card is because again, if you look at Temporal Forces, some of the art rares, they have them Minchino, Chinchino, very cute cards. But one of the rooms is like a complete wreck, and one of the rooms is kind of tidied up. And I just assumed like, okay, they got the bushy tails, it kind of works. So um, I don't know, man. We're in a pretty tight contest here. Someone's got to give at some point. We haven't used this different game, so right now we're all tied up at 80. The first Pokemon that Will had to guess was a Rhydon. Then I had a Joltik. We came back with Mudsdale the week after. And now we have a Minchino lined up. So we're all tied up at 80 points. I don't know, man. I did not expect us to be doing this well, to be honest.
That was pretty good. I really didn't expect it. The other Dex entry is a bit harder. I don't know if you would have gotten it. It says they greet one another by rubbing each other with their tails, which are always kept well groomed and clean. I guess it is also referencing
No.
cleaning, but not using it as a broom. I feel like it might have been a little bit. tougher. So I try to be
The
nice
broom was what
and
gave
give
it
you the,
away.
yeah, I
The
try to
broom
be
gave it
nice.
away. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So I'll take it a little bit easier on the next week. But yeah, that was good, man. Like I said, we're all tied up at 80 and no one's used a tip yet. So I kind of had those tips there in place that it would be a little bit of a, a consequence for guessing, but at the same time, you have that ability to kind of keep going. So someone's got to use this eventually. We're going to find out when that happens, maybe next week. Who knows? But with all that being said, that's all we got. Will, any final thoughts before we say goodbye to them?
That's it. Thank you guys so much for listening, and leave some comments. Let us know what you're thinking, and if you guys want us to talk about anything specific.
Yeah, feedback was always welcome. Rate us, all those different things. Follow, subscribe, all the things that you typically hear when you listen to these things. With that being said, folks, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. We'll see you next time here on the EXP Share podcast.